Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. An acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to the live broadcast of Time for Hemp all around the world on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. I want to give a big shout out to all of my friends up in Canada and say thank you to KDK Distributors for being nice enough to give us a grant to keep us loud, proud, and strong. And of course, send our love to Head Shop Canada as well for the grant that they give us here to keep us strong. And we want to let everybody know that today is a very big day. We finished the Seattle Hemp Fest in the past. We got the Portland Hemp Stock coming up, and we've got two big guests on the program. We got Paul Stanford and Paul Armentano on the broadcast today. Paul Stanford, my joint host, are you there?
Yes, I am, Casper. Thank you very much.
Good morning. And Paul Armentano, are you there?
I am, Casper. Good to be on the show.
And is it Armentano or Armentano?
Whichever you prefer. Armentano.
That's what I thought. And every time you're on, I think I ask you that. Well, why don't you let people know what you've been up to lately? You've had quite a full plate, and then we'll kick off the round of discussions.
Sure. Well, as anyone listening to this show, I'm sure is aware, there has been a major mainstream media buzz these past few weeks about marijuana and marijuana policy, largely facilitated by CNN and the change of heart from Sanjay Gupta, at one time a presidential appointment to be Surgeon General, and his admission that America has been systematically lied to about marijuana for these last 70 years. That has triggered a major firestorm of public discussion, including some very pointed questions aimed at the White House over the last 48 hours. And obviously this ongoing discussion is the sort of situation that groups like NORML and all other reform groups, this is the day we hope for, because once we start having this discussion, we win. Because as you know, as the listeners to this program know, the facts, the science do not justify, do not substantiate our failed policy. And when we have this open and free discussion, the facts are on our side for the world to see.
Now, you said some of the poignant questions in the last 48 hours to the White House. Why? Has there been some kind of big march to 1600 Pennsylvania and a knock on the door with a handful of people with some real important questions waiting for an answer?
No, the White House press corps is simply doing its job, as they should. 48 hours ago, a reporter from Roll Call asked the president, or I should say his chief spokesperson, if the White House was willing to reconsider its position on medical marijuana, similar to how Sanjay Gupta had reconsidered his position on medical marijuana. And then 24 hours ago, a reporter from CNN asked the White House that how it could continue to maintain a classification for marijuana that schedules it and defines it as a substance that's more harmful than cocaine, methamphetamine, and anabolic steroids. Those are very good questions.
Was there very good answers coming back?
No, I would not say the responses were particularly satisfying. But again, it is important for this discussion to publicly and openly be taking place, because for a very long time it has not. And it is clear when we see this discussion, when the public sees this discussion, when reporters ask these sort of pointed questions and get very poor answers in response, again, it makes it clear to anyone listening that this is a failed policy and this is a policy whose days are numbered.
Well, I know Paul Stanford was very excited about seeing that report on CNN, weren't you, Paul Stanford?
Yeah, we, Paul, I'm sure you know I have a collection of antique medical marijuana bottles. So they contacted me to get a copy of those pictures. And, it was just a short little blip in there, but they showed the bottles about 2 minutes into the show. So I was happy to contribute in some small way that way. But back in 2009, as I'm sure you recall, Paul, Sanjay Gupta had written an article in Time magazine called Why I Would Vote No on Legalization. And I had an opportunity to be interviewed for Anderson Cooper's 360 about 6 months after that, or less than 6 months. Maybe it was 5 months. So I had told their reporter, Joe Johns, that I wanted to debate Sanjay Gupta because he'd written that article in Time magazine. So he took that back to Gupta, and in the section on Anderson Cooper's 360, Gupta followed it up immediately after the 3 or 4 minutes that I got on that show about our work here in Oregon. And he changed his mind at that point and started to say that, there is some medical utility for marijuana, which is exactly the opposite of what he'd written in Time magazine. So in some small way, I'm happy to have contributed along with, all the science out there, obviously, to change his point of view. But he explained that pretty clearly in his documentary and in the run-up to it, and how he apologized for spreading that misinformation. So I was pretty excited, in the run-up to the documentary, because I had played a small part in providing some images for the show.
I know that you also believe that this is going to be an exciting sweep across the United States, that we are just starting. I'm sometimes curious as to what to make of the silence from the Justice Department and from the DEA. They haven't really said exactly what they're going to do yet.
Right. In regards to the historic passage of initiatives in Colorado and Washington in November to allow for the personal possession and to allow for the commercially licensed production and state licensed retail sale of cannabis, you're right. The federal administration, the DEA, the Department of Justice, they've all largely been moot on this issue. And in particular, the Department of Justice has been moot on this issue even when asked directly, both by the governors of those two states as well as by members of Congress from those two states, even when directly asked what the DOJ's response intends to be. Holder has said they have no response at this point. In fact, I don't believe he's commented publicly on the issue in several months, and at that time he had promised a formal response would be coming, quote, relatively soon. That obviously has not happened, and we saw earlier this week some media reports from anonymous sources, take them for what they are worth, noting that at this point, regulators in those two states are moving forward under the guise that they have tacit acceptance from the federal government to go ahead and move forward with fully implementing those two initiatives in regards to state licensed production and retail sales of cannabis.
I think it's interesting. Last February, we heard that the Justice Department was going to come out with some statement. And in March, the DEA heads, the former administrators of the DEA, said they were going to, that if the federal government didn't act within 1 month to quash the process in Washington and Colorado, that it would be too late. Well, obviously, I think it's too late now. During the campaign, we had an initiative on the ballot here in Oregon as well. In the end, we just got 47% of the vote. Pretty close. We came within about 110,000 votes of winning in Oregon as well, and we're moving forward with initiatives right now so that we pass it in 2014. But the folks at the UFCW who had endorsed Oregon's initiative early in the process, shortly after we had qualified, they said that they had word from the Obama administration that if they passed, that the Obama administration would have a hands-off approach. Of course, there was never anything formal about that communication through the UFCW. Obviously, the unions were prime backers of President Obama's campaign. But it looks like they had an inside line, because that's exactly what's happened. I'm happy to see that, and shocked actually, because I always anticipated that the federal government would move in to enjoin the initiatives there. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I'm a little surprised myself, simply because, and this is something I'd written about shortly after the passage of these two measures, is that if we look back historically at the way alcohol prohibition fell in this nation, we can see the writing on the wall in regards to the fall of marijuana prohibition. Alcohol prohibition fell when a handful of states, led by New York State in 1923, simply voted to opt out of the enforcement of this failed federal policy. And by time 10 states on their own decided that they were no longer going to be the enforcement mechanism at the state level for this federal prohibition, the federal government had no choice but to simply abolish the federal prohibition and leave the decision of whether or not to criminalize alcohol up to the states. Because even though the federal prohibition is in place, the enforcement mechanism, the teeth to the prohibition, largely falls upon state law enforcement. And what we see in Colorado and what we see in Washington and what I expect we're going to see in the coming years in other states like Oregon, like Maine, like Massachusetts, like California, is that more and more states are going to opt out of the federal prohibition. They're essentially telling the federal government that if you want to continue this policy, then the burden is on you to enforce it, because we're no longer going to spend taxpayer dollars and do your dirty work for you. And what we saw with alcohol is when simply 10 states said, we're no longer going to do your bidding on this, the federal government changed its policy. I think we're going to see a very similar principle at play here. The federal government knows that the public no longer supports this policy. I don't believe they have the political will to continue enforcing this policy when a number of states, and more importantly, the state law enforcement, opt out of enforcing this policy. And that's what's happening.
What I think is amazing, too, is the way it's just kind of like the public's baffled. I mean, they're behind us, but they're kind of standing back and don't know what to do. And people who are wanting to start businesses are excited about doing it, but they're still not quite sure what to do. And it's still kind of like a really kind of like Wild West type of atmosphere.
It is, but largely that's an atmosphere that is being cultivated by the fact that the federal government has not particularly been a cooperative actor in all this, particularly in regards, and I'm sure Paul can speak to this as well, the inability of these businesses to engage with financial institutions, and the fact that banks and financial institutions are skittish of dealing with these sort of businesses, and that is because of the federal prohibition and the pressure that's put on these institutions not to work with these state-licensed legitimate businesses. And again, we're the federal government to be a cooperative actor as opposed to an entity that's simply providing more and more hurdles for these businesses. We would see certainly a much smoother transition than we've seen so far.
Well, I'd be a lot happier if there was a little more proactive stance on the half of the Obama administration. But I guess not interfering in a negative way, as all the previous heads of the Drug Enforcement Administration had been urging them to do, is a lot better than the other alternative, which is I always figured that they were going to move in and join the initiative. In fact, we even designed our proposal, the whole first third of the text. The preamble was mainly there to deal with the lawsuit that I always figured would be inevitable from the federal government to try to quash an initiative that passed to regulate marijuana. But it's a good thing that we don't have to fight that legal fight. Here in Oregon, we have been through a fight like that with doctor-assisted suicide or death with dignity. Pick your after, whichever, name you want to go with there. But the government came in and enjoined Oregon's law, and it went through a legal battle that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It was fast-tracked and got to the Supreme Court within 2 years, and the Supreme Court upheld Oregon's death with dignity law. I always anticipated that would be what happened with Oregon or whatever other state would pass a regulatory bill such as Colorado and Washington now have. So
one thing we've passed is that minute marker that tells us it's time for a commercial break, and we've got to pay our bills. Then we're going to listen to a song about how fantastic marijuana is. After that, we're going to come back and pick up where we left off. Please make it a point to let our advertisers know that you heard about them here on the big program, and go to American Freedom Radio and let them know how much you appreciate them having us on the show, because you too like taking time for hemp.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org. Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Green Glass Clean is a 100% green liquid cleaner that is designed to wash the toughest resin stains from pipes, bongs, and hookahs. Green Glass Clean is safe to use on glass, plastic, ceramic, wood, and about anything you smoke from, so you can enjoy the full flavor of your smoke. Green Glass Clean is easy to use. Just dilute a small amount, then soak, rinse, and dry. Green Glass Clean will gently dissolve any stuck-on crud from your pipe, keeping your smoking gear fresh and clean. Order Green Glass Clean at greenglassclean.com. GakAttack.com. And for those stubborn, hard-to-reach resin spots that just won't come off, there is the GakAttack Brush Pack. GakAttack Brush Pack keeps your smoking gear clean and looking shiny. The tough yet gentle nylon bristles scrub and scrape buildups and residue with ease. Wire-braided handle bends for easy maneuvering without damaging your smoking apparatus. Using the GakAttack Brush Pack with Green Glass Clean will keep your pipes, bongs, and hookahs clean. Order your GakAttack Brush Pack by going to GakAttack.com.
It's time for hemp prohibition to end. The cannabis legalization movement has long waited to have congressional or Senate hearings to present the failure of drug prohibition, medical benefits of cannabis, and more. Time for Hemp is tired of waiting for the cannabis movement to get such an invitation and has organized this 5 two-hour conference series special. Time for Hemp will be hosting live specials to produce a global cannabis summit with some of the most brilliant minds and amazing leaders of the industrial hemp and medical cannabis movement. This presentation will be broadcasted live on American Freedom Radio online, AM, FM stations across America, and on Roku, and will be archived at American Freedom Radio and on iTunes. During each commercial-free broadcast, moderators will conduct discussions with 6 expert panelists brought together from all corners of the earth to present the most current research and statistics concerning this trillion-dollar industry. Tune in live starting each Friday this August at 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This special presentation is being hosted by Casper Leitch on AmericanFreedomRadio.com.
You have been listening to Muck Sticky here on Time for Hemp, live all around the world on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Muck Sticky is an old friend of mine. Muck, I love you. Thank you for all you've done for Time for Hemp and the hours that you and I spent on the phone, giggling and laughing and cheering each other on. It's nice to have you as one of my friends. We are listening also to a commercial each broadcast about this summit that we're doing here on Time for Hemp. Before we get back to the big broadcast, I want to remind people that tomorrow we start an hour early, as we have been all the Fridays of this month. Every Friday we are doing 2-hour specials, no commercial interruptions, no music, no silliness. It's a global cannabis summit done with a lot of seriousness. Here is the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Over the many years, I've had the chance to speak to a lot of great minds and very important people, and have always been baffled as to why it is such amazing dignitaries in the marijuana movement, such as our joint host and guest today, or others who have been on this show, have not been asked to speak before Congress or the Senate. We've had L.B. Masek on, we've had Irv Rosenfeld on, we've had Neil Franklin on. I mean, I can tell you all the wonderful people we've had on, and you know, audience members, that they do need to be heard. And we also know that if somebody belches wrong or has a bad pop at a grocery store, we get 3 congressional hearings, and we get 2 Senate commissions, and we get the White House coming out and doing a big press statement about it. But we get all these people here recently, several millions of people over the past several years, being locked up for touching a plant. We are denied the right to have freedom from foreign oil because this plant is outlawed. And Congress won't even have a discussion about it with some of our most brilliant minds. And Time for Hemp got really tired of sitting around and waiting for that invitation. And so we are now approaching every Friday as if we have been invited to speak before Congress and the Senate and the United Nations. And we've put together 5 2-hour presentations, and we're calling it the 2013 Global Summit. And if you tune in this particular Friday, we will be covering what's going on with the criminal justice mess that the Prohibition has put into place, with Peter Criss, co-founder of Leitch, Sean Dunnigan, former DEA senior intelligence research specialist, Neil Franklin, retired state police major and executive director, Leonard Freeling, former judge and practicing attorney, Michael Sendridge, former prosecutor in San Diego, California, Larry Talley, U.S. Naval and Intelligence Specialist, and Steve Downing, retired Deputy Chief of Police, along with yours truly, taking time for him. Please tune in. Thank you, gentlemen, for allowing me to do a big, long, shameless plug for our show tomorrow. And what made me think about that, too, Paul Armentano, is that you put together a really interesting article called Medical Marijuana Efforts Soldier On Without Congress's Help. And it seems like you and I are dealing on the same sheet of music there.
Oh, for sure. You're referring to a recent op-ed I had in the Daily Caller, which is a Washington, D.C. publication, I believe, owned by Tucker Carlson. It's just highlighting this disconnect where we have overwhelming public support in favor of this policy change. In regards to medical marijuana, we now have 20 states and Washington, D.C. having passed legislation to allow for the physician-authorized consumption of marijuana. And in a dozen of those states, including the nation's capital, those laws also allow for the retail sale and distribution of marijuana to authorized patients. Here we have this going on literally just blocks from the White House. Yet, when you look at members of Congress and their position on this issue, you see this remarkable disconnect where we have anywhere from 80 to 85% public acknowledged support for this change in policy. Yet when you look at the limited number of co-sponsors in, for instance, the U.S. Congress House of Representatives, or when you acknowledge the fact that there is not a single sponsor in the Senate of medical marijuana law reform, we realize that there is this divide where we have support from the public and that has translated to virtually no support in Washington. I believe that fewer than 4% of all federally elected officials are now on record in support of medical marijuana. We have 85% public support. We have less than 4% support in Washington. And that is what ultimately needs to change in order to bring about a change in federal policy. We are bringing about a change in state policy. Already brought about a change in the public's attitudes. The sort of final piece of this puzzle, then, changing the hearts and minds of those in Washington, D.C.
Well, I also know that there's a lot of people who are frustrated that money is being utilized in states where it is legal, and those in Congress are still being quiet. I've been told, too, by Howard Woodridge that there are a lot of elected officials that publicly don't support ending prohibition, but privately think it's a necessity. And so we have people who think in those terms, and we've also got members of the Justice Department driving by legal medical marijuana dispensaries in Washington, D.C., and arranging raids in states where medical marijuana is legal, and they're arresting patients. It's just watching this burp, this hiccup, what do you want to call that, bipolar wreck?
Well, what's even more frustrating to me is that the members of Congress from these states that allow medical marijuana or have allowed licensed dispensing of marijuana, where are they in this discussion? They go to Washington, D.C., in theory, to represent the views of their constituents. Well, the constituents in their home states have passed medical marijuana. The constituents in their home states are using marijuana. In some cases, they're legally providing marijuana. And their representatives, their elected representatives in Washington, D.C., not only are they not representing them, but they are not protecting them. They are literally throwing their own constituents who voted for them, who sent them to Washington, D.C., under the bus by being silent when they get to the halls of Congress and not standing up for the laws of their own state.
Well, that's one thing that's really amazed me, too. It's like when Steve D'Angelo is facing the problems with the IRS audits and all that garbage, you would think, when they're coming in for the raids, that these governors would be standing up. First of all, they appreciate the tax dollars that these dispensaries generate. They are protecting their own citizens at that point, and their voters have said these are our laws. You think that they would recognize that collectively, if all those state governors and state senators from all the states got together as a bloc, they would be a very powerful group.
They would be. And even if they personally were not particularly supportive of these policies, one would think that once their constituents voted in these policies, and once these policies had been implemented, that they would feel an obligation to go to Washington, D.C. and represent this constituency and defend the policies of their own states. And as you acutely point out, that is not happening. There are a handful of congressional leaders, like Jared Polis from Colorado or Earl Blumenauer from Oregon, that are meeting that obligation. But the overwhelming majority of their colleagues are not. And as far as I know, they at this point have received little political pressure, either from the media or from their own constituents, to stand up and act any differently. California is a perfect example where you have Senator Barbara Boxer and Senator Dianne Feinstein, have been either quiet on this issue or have been openly hostile to this issue, despite the fact that they represent districts in Congress that are some of the most supportive for marijuana law reform, more so than virtually anywhere else in this country.
Now, here in Portland, I think Paul Stanford can attest to that. I think one of our senators has been very supportive, Senator Wyden. Isn't that right, Paul?
Yeah, he's been pushing the hemp bill. He hasn't been as public about medical marijuana as Earl Blumenauer is now, or Jared Paulus, obviously. They've really taken the lead now that Barney Frank is retired. But, you mentioned Howard Woodridge a moment ago, and, he says he goes and lobbies the legislators in D.C., and he has complained on this show, doing previous interviews you and I have done with him, that we don't have enough lobbyists in D.C. He says, I don't know, I'm not in D.C., and I know you're not there either, right? Paul? You're in California, right?
Yes, I was in D.C., though, for well over a decade.
How often did you go down and try to make appointments with legislators and try to convince them why they should change their attitude while you were there?
It's funny. During the time I was there, obviously there was far less interest from congressional lawmakers and their staff about this issue.
It was
now.
The third rail.
So, I would say it was something that we were probably on the Hill about once a month, something along those lines. But my understanding now is that there's actually a congressional caucus that deals with the marijuana issue, and those staffers meet with representatives from NORML and other law reform groups much more regularly, like every few weeks. We're taking those sort of appointments now and having those meetings.
I need to drop it here because every so many minutes we've got to stop and pay our bills, and we're going to take a commercial break to make that happen.
Doing it.
Then we're going to come back and pick up where we left off.
And he said maybe there's one or two other people that are doing it part-time. But obviously,
time for hemp.
We have lobbying those 400. Sooner the change will happen then.
It's time for hemp prohibition to end. The cannabis legalization movement has long waited to have congressional or Senate hearings to present the failure of drug prohibition, medical benefits of cannabis, and more. Time for Hemp is tired of waiting for the cannabis movement to get such an invitation and has organized this 5 2-hour conference series special. Time for Hemp will be hosting live specials to produce a global cannabis summit with some of the most brilliant minds and amazing leaders of the industrial hemp and medical cannabis movement. This presentation will be broadcasted live on American Freedom Radio, online, AM, FM stations across America, and on Roku, and will be archived at American Freedom Radio and on iTunes. During each commercial-free broadcast, moderators will conduct discussions with 6 expert panelists brought together from all corners of the earth to present the most current research and statistics concerning this trillion-dollar industry. Tune in live starting each Friday this August at 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This special presentation is being hosted by Casper Leitch on AmericanFreedomRadio.com.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Green Glass Clean is a 100% green liquid cleaner that is designed to wash the toughest resin stains from pipes, bongs, and hookahs. Green Glass Clean is safe to use on glass, plastic, ceramic, wood, and about anything you smoke from, so you can enjoy the full flavor of your smoke. Green Glass Clean is easy to use. Just dilute a small amount, then soak, rinse, and dry. Green Glass Clean will gently dissolve any stuck-on crud from your pipe, keeping your smoking gear fresh and clean. Order Green Glass Clean at greenglassclean.com. And for those stubborn, hard-to-reach resin spots that just won't come off, there is the Gak Attack Brush Pack. Gak Attack Brush Pack keeps your smoking gear clean and looking shiny. The tough yet gentle nylon bristles scrub and scrape buildups and residue with ease. Wire-braided handle bends for easy maneuvering without damaging your smoking apparatus. Using the Gak Attack Brush Pack with Green Glass Clean will keep your pipes, bongs, and hookahs clean. Order your Gak Attack Brush Pack by going to gakattack.com.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Today podcast, and on the Time for Hemp Today podcast, we like to put a spotlight on hardworking activists from all around the world and include a little bit of music. And we're going to get back to the program here in just a minute, but a friend of mine, Kelly Christen from KDK Distributors, wants to make a special announcement to all the members of the audience of Time for Hemp. And Kelly, why don't you let people know all about that?
You betcha. We're lucky enough to be able to offer some totally 100% free vaporizers, high-quality vaporizers, to medical patients anywhere in the world who cannot afford one on their own. As I know, and probably most of you do who are listening, those on assisted income or disability pension, whatever the case may be, they can't work, they're ill, and they medicate with marijuana and find it difficult to be able to purchase a quality vaporizer. So it's super simple. If either you yourself or you can send one in for someone who you think might be very happy to receive a free vaporizer, send me an email with a little bit of information about the individual and, of course, a photograph, because we do publish the winners in Treating Yourself magazine, and send it to Kelly, Kelly, at kdkwholesale.ca. And once we receive it, we put it in our really small barrel and pick people out. Well, I have to say, in all honesty, we've doubled our giveaway thanks to the guys down at Vape, and of course our ongoing relationship with the great folks at Herbal Air that have been with us since the beginning on this program. And, you know, we've doubled our giveaways, so I'm hoping that we can double our entries, because I got to tell you, in all honesty, we're starting to run low. So come on, you people out there. I know that there are just thousands of you, and please, you know, can send in something, and because I'm telling you, we sure love giving them away, and we know it does great things. And you know, thanks to both Herbal Air for originating the program and Vape for coming along, doubling our free vaporizer output.
And Kelly, I tell you, you are remarkable, very amazing. I've been uploading the past live shows into the Time for Hemp iTunes live podcast. You can find it for free on iTunes. All 3 years I'm getting them loaded up. Boy, it's a chore, but I'm making it happen. And I realized, my gosh, Kelly, I think you came on board like the third or fourth week that we went live on AmericanFreedomRadio.com back in 2009. You have been a backbone to this series as well as the movement. And honestly, Kelly, this show would not be anywhere the strength it is, would not have anywhere the size of audience that it has, and our guests would not be heard as loudly as they are heard had it not been for the support of you and the amazing team at KDK. So
we've really made some difference in a lot of people's lives out there. It's not the fact that they actually save money because it reduces their need to use medical marijuana, because it reduces, because it's way more efficient, and it reduces their consumption, so they save money. But also it's phenomenal for the health factor and receiving their medication in a much less harmful way. So it's a double-edged sword, and it really, really has gone to help some people out there who are really in need. And I know that, we can't reach them all, but I'll tell you what, we can reach a lot, and we are continuing to do that every month. So please keep your letters coming in, and let anybody you know, or any compassion clubs, or dispensaries or anything, let them know that this exists, and hopefully we can continue the program.
Because it is much, much healthier to vaporize than it is to burn and smoke, baby, huh?
Without question. Well, there are well over 20 carcinogens created by combustion, and of course they're eliminated. And, no rolling paper glue, no butane from a lighter. So yes, from a health perspective, it is a substantial improvement in terms of getting that medication into your body.
Well, Kelly, I want to thank you on behalf of the marijuana movement for your graciousness to make certain that people who are sick and need a healthy way to take their medication can do so. I also want to remind people that you can find all 4 of our podcasts up in the iTunes, and that is a great way to share these podcasts with all your friends all around the world. We have the Time for Hemp Music Podcast, Time for Hemp Classic Podcast, Time for Hemp Live podcast, and then the podcast that you are currently listening to, the Time for Hemp Today podcast, all found at iTunes. Also, if you go to timeforhemp.com, that's the number 4, timeforhemp.com, you can find lots of videos that you can download for free. There are segments of the original Time for Hemp TV series found there. Also, I've done interviews over the past couple of years at the Seattle Hemp Fest and the Portland Hemp Stock, and those are found there, as well are segments that I have been the joint host of on Cannabis Common Sense with Paul Stanford, who is the joint host on Time for Hemp Live every Thursday on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Well, we're going to listen to some music right now, and then we're going to come back and take a whole lot more Time for Hemp.
Hydroponic, chronic. Show you how to use to get real high. Hydroponic, chronic. Hydroponic, chronic. Try to stop me and don't ask me why. Hydroponic, chronic. Wake and bake. I do whatever it takes to get me through the day. Sometimes I smoke a fat J. Needless to say, I spend my money on the intel. And if I happen upon a seed, I grow it like coming through my window. It's sin though, so I'm told. The only sin I see is when I'm fiending and the joint has not been rolled. Some enjoy to sip on gin and tonic, but I'll be smoking supersonic, hydroponic, chronic. I'm getting high with the capital J. I'm smoking pot all day, it's the only way to play. What can I say? I've got red eyes, yet I keep on soaking. I'm jiggity joking when I say I quit smoking the herb. Hit the curves, it's about to get crazy. Some motherfuckers smoking then they get lazy, but I never tire when I take a hit. I smoke the crazy shit, you might have heard of it. I'll admit I think about it when I bust a nut. I'll hump an ugly slut, and then I reach for the doobie that does me up. And if I sometimes I'm ironic, it's because I'm smoking supersonic, hydroponic, chronic. Hydroponic, chronic. Show you how to use to get real high. Hydroponic, chronic. Hydroponic, chronic. Try to stop me and don't ask me why. Hydroponic, chronic. I take one hit, and then I start flying. Sometimes I think I hear my brain cells frying, but it makes me more creative, you know. When I get high, I can roll with the flow, show me the dough. I'll show you what it means to get real high. Don't try to stop me and don't ask me why. Stick the bone to your lips and start choking. You'll know when you're done because your ass will start smoking. You'll be choking when you're done with your turn. And then a short time later you will start to burn. So you reach for the bone to take another hit, but it isn't your turn, and so you throw a fit. Aw shit, it's finally coming your way. But then your homie interrupts you and you hear him say you forget something, so make your own mnemonic. You think you're getting sick, but it isn't the bubonic. Now things will start to clear and you might think that it's ironic, because you're smoking supersonic, hydroponic, chronic. 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 Hydroponic, chronic.
Don't ask me why.
I'm kinda high, let me excuse myself. But it seems like it's just moments since we met. I'm kinda high, let me introduce myself.
Yeah, baby, let me introduce myself. My name is Casper Leitch. Some people call it Casper Leitch. And we are having a conversation with Paul Armentano. Some call it Paul Armentano. And we are having a joint host today with Dr. Paul Stanford, who is not a Dr. Paul Stanford, but is D. Paul Stanford. So, now that we've settled all the confusions, gentlemen, I'll let D. Paul Stanford have a couple of questions with Paul Armentano as Casper Leitch sits here and tries to figure out what show I'm on. Oh, yeah, time for him. Go ahead, Paul. Paul.
You better put that bong or vaporizer down for a minute there, Casper. Paul, I've got to say I really have admired a lot of your writing and your reviews of medical articles. You know, I do my little weekly television show, and I always scan to see if you have a latest review of a medical journal article out there, because they're fascinating and illuminating, and I thank you for continuing that service.
Thank you. It pains me, even when I see, fairly people who are advocates or people who are sympathetic with this issue, that constantly fall back on this refrain that says, well, I'm supportive of medical marijuana, but I understand our opponents' concerns because we just don't have enough research. We just haven't studied this issue long enough. When the reality is that if you go to PubMed, the website that's a repository for all peer-reviewed journal articles that are published, and you type in marijuana 2013, you want to simply review or get a sense of how many peer-reviewed scientific papers were published regarding the cannabis plant in this year alone, you get over 3,100 separate papers. If you simply don't type in any date whatsoever, you'll get over 23,000 published papers. Yet if you were to type in the very commonly prescribed analgesic drug hydrocodone in the PubMed and not give it any year, you'll get 570 references in the scientific literature to this pain-relieving narcotic. It is not hyperbole to say that cannabis is already, even despite prohibition, arguably one of the most studied plants on earth, and that we have a greater fundamental understanding of the way cannabis and its active constituents interact with living organisms than we have an understanding of most, if not all, conventional medications that humans are prescribed and consume every day. So it's not a matter of needing more research. It's a matter of having a public policy that is no longer divorced from what the research tells us. And I'm glad that there's people like you out there, Paul, that are taking this literature or my summaries of this literature and getting that information out there.
Oh, yeah, I love it. I mean, you've got this little synopsis. It's written up. I don't have to do much editing. I can just read it on the teleprompter, and I really appreciate that. So I'm always looking and happy to see your latest medical journal article synopsis. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Well,
how did you first come to be involved with NORML? When did you first become an activist? And tell us a little bit about your history.
Well, probably like most people, I was an activist before I was a professional activist. My interest in this issue goes back to my early teenage years, which would have been in the mid-1980s. I had a very strong belief from the outset that it was an improper use of government power to allow the state to draw an arbitrary line that says it is okay, it is legal for an adult in private to consume certain potentially mood-altering substances, but in other cases we are going to bring to bear the full force of the state to target and prosecute and punish those who consume other potentially mood-altering substances, and that the federal government or that the state government was going to be the arbiter. They were going to be the ones who drew this arbitrary line. I felt at a very early age that was an abuse of power, and nowhere did I think this abuse of power was greater than in the case of cannabis, where that arbitrary line had been drawn, and it had been drawn to outlaw a substance that was objectively safer than both recreational intoxicants and conventional pharmaceuticals for which it could arguably replace. So that's what got me interested in this issue, was trying to curtail what I saw, this growing abuse of state power, to regulate what people put in their bodies and ultimately to control how people think. Because the reason the federal government and the state has a problem with marijuana is because it alters mood. That is ultimately what this is about, and I think that human beings have the inherent right to alter their own mood in the privacy of their own home.
I pretty much mirrored that when I was a teenager. Sounds like a decade before you were. I read the literature out there, and I also saw that the federal government used marijuana prohibition to quash other social movements like the environmental movement and the anti-war movement, that they would go in a lot of cases, plant marijuana on activists to take them out, so to speak. And so I think that happens today, less so here in the United States, but you see it in Southeast Asia and Malaysia and places like that, where you can be hung and killed if you have more than 200 grams of cannabis.
Yeah, but, I agree.
When did you first become involved with NORML?
Oh, in the mid-1990s, and I've been involved on and off with NORML for about the better part of the past 20 years. And just getting back to what you had just said, I agree that in large part the power of marijuana prohibition comes from its selective enforcement. The notion that governments and police have the ability to selectively enforce the prohibition against certain groups of people or certain people with certain interests, while turning a blind eye to the prohibition against other groups of people. It has been very convenient for the federal government to enact a prohibition on an activity that is engaged in by such a wide number of people, but only to proactively enforce that prohibition against a certain minority of people. And that's really where the power in this law has lied. It has allowed the federal government to largely engage in a culture war for all of these years.
Okay, I have a question for both of you. We've only got a couple of minutes for this. Carl Olson says that no matter how many states legalize it, it's really irrelevant until they reschedule it. It's just going to be a problem, and that's that. And what we need to focus on is getting it rescheduled and nothing else. And to focus on these individual state initiatives is more of a waste of time and energy. I'm paraphrasing just to kind of get that question out there. And I know that when people are in states where it has been changed for medical marijuana to be allowed, they do operate in kind of in fear of the federal government, like D'Angelo, them coming in with the IRS and shutting them down. So is Carl Olson right? No matter how many states, if like 40 states turn it over?
I think the votes in Colorado and Washington prove that he's not right. And, sure, it would be great if the federal government rolled over and rescheduled marijuana, but the initiatives are driving the process and direct them. The old saying, think globally, act locally. Well, you have a lot more influence in your local government, and so taking advantage of the initiative process has obviously changed the conversation. Wouldn't you agree, Paul?
I would completely agree with you, Paul. And I would, I know Carl. I respect what he's doing, but try and tell literally the hundreds of thousands of individuals that are using cannabis in compliance with their state laws and benefiting from it, that a better option would have been to simply try and target the federal government and not have focused on the states. People that are seriously ill cannot play that waiting game. The other point I would raise, too, regarding rescheduling is that I think when one fully understands cannabis and they understand the CSA, there's a recognition that cannabis doesn't belong in Schedule 1, but it really doesn't belong in Schedule 2 through 5 either. It ought to be descheduled. It ought to be removed from the Controlled Substances Act, because the Controlled Substances Act is there to regulate largely patented, privately produced products like oxycodone and anabolic steroids. Those are the sort of products that are regulated.
I need to jump in here. We're down to about 1 minute. Give a shout out, Paul Armentano.
Will do. People that want to learn more about this issue can contact Normal at norml.org. And I'd also add that on September 1st, we have the second updated and revised edition of our book, Marijuana is Safer, So Why Are We Driving People to Drink? I would encourage people to check that out. They can pick it up at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or from the publisher at chelseagreen.com.
Thank you. Paul Stanford, real quick.
Hemp.org, HEMP, and I want to thank Paul for a fascinating hour and your good work, sir.
And tomorrow we start an hour early, so keep that in mind when you get ready to take Time for Hemp.
Pesticides, the poisonous